Hey everybody, Dave Braz here from Bear Hill Baits, and I'm here to talk to you today about the line setup that I utilize in a lot of my finesse fishing. So this has been kind of a hot topic lately on a lot of the forums and some of the online groups in terms of just questions around what's the best setup for a drop shot, what's the best setup for a weightless wacky Senko, and I want to kind of share my personal favorite and how I utilize or how I set up my lines. And it's basically, I really like the braid to fluorocarbon setup. And just to explain why that is you know, when we're dealing with braid, braid has very high sensitivity, no stretch, you feel everything. And that's really key when we're talking about finesse fishing, right? If you're talking about finesse fishing, we're not talking about a largemouth blowing up on a topwater bait. We're talking about a fish just coming up, looking at a little French fry of a meal and just going, and that braid really helps in helping detect those bites. The fluorocarbon, on the other hand, allows a natural fall. It's invisible under the water. So when you put the two together, you have a really great way to go ahead and get the benefit of both worlds. When we're talking about the weightless wacky Senko, I really do like utilizing a high visibility braid, and the reason is the braid floats. And the key to a wacky weightless Senko in particular is when that bait's falling, you want it to fall naturally, so you're going to keep it on slack line. And that high visibility braid is going to allow you to see that braid floating on the surface. And as that bait's falling, if there's a strike, that line's going to jump, move. You'll see that line start swimming away. So that high visibility is going to really help you detect bites while you're letting that bait fall. Meanwhile, that fluorocarbon is going to let it fall naturally. So a lot of questions I get around this is, how long of a leader do you tie? Well, in the aspect of a weightless wacky Senko, you want that leader to at least be as long as the depth that you figure that you're going to be fishing, right? And for the most part, you're not going to be fishing a weightless wacky Senko in super deep water. If you are going to be fishing deeper water, then you're probably going to go with a method that I really like, which is you do like to use a 1/4 ounce weightless wacky jig head. I do love to drop shot a 4-inch Senko wacky rigged as well. But in the drop shot aspect, I tend to not utilize the high visibility braid. Not that I think that it matters all that much. That fluorocarbon leader is typically long enough that I don't think the fish tend to necessarily see it. But when you're drop shotting in deeper water, in particular, that's how I like to do it. In deeper water, that no stretch, high sensitivity is going to give you the ability to detect those bites. The other thing when we're talking about finesse fishing is we're pretty much talking about very small, tiny, lightweight baits. Weightless wacky Senko is very difficult to cast, and in particular on like a fluorocarbon. You're going to find that the thinner the diameter of the braid, the better it is to cast the lightweight baits. Seth Feider does a great video about marabou hair jigs, and if you think about marabou hair jigs, and you know, he's talking 16th to 8th ounce marabou hair jigs, and if you've ever tried to cast one of these things, it's obnoxious to try to cast it. But the key to his success is being able to cast it utilizing super thin braid, and he utilizes a fluorocarbon leader, and it's one of those things that it allows you to cast some of the really lightweight braids. Let me talk really very quickly about you know, why I like to, or some of the leader material that I like to use, and how I like to put this together. For me personally, I do like, I mean, you could pick any particular fluorocarbon or braid that you like, but I will say the thinner the braid that you use, the more benefit you're going to get. And in joining the two, I like to utilize the FG knot. And I'll walk you through a demonstration of the FG knot, but the FG knot is essentially taking a piece of fluorocarbon and taking the braid and intertwining it around the fluorocarbon. And it almost acts almost like a Chinese finger trap, in that the harder you pull, the more it cinches into itself, and basically tightens the knot around the fluorocarbon leader. And what key is that two things that the thin diameter braid is going to do for you is, the thinner the braid, the more that braid's actually going to cut into the fluorocarbon and make that knot even stronger. It gets a much better grip on that fluorocarbon. The other piece is that because it's what you're weaving around the outside of the fluorocarbon, the thickness of the braid is really going to dictate the thickness of the knot. And if you do this with a 12 to 15 pound braid, and you utilize a 6 to 8 pound fluorocarbon, you're going to have a super, super thin, flexible knot that's a low profile, that I prefer over any other method. There are some people out there who really like to utilize swivels, to which I don't really necessarily agree with that all that much. One of the benefits of the braid is that you're not going to have to worry about line twists. And the only time I'm using a swivel is if I want to avoid line twists. But what the swivel won't do is you do not want to reel that swivel, even the micro ones, through your rod guides. You're going to do some damage to the eyes of your rod if you go ahead and reel that thing through there. But what you have here with the FG knot is this is not only a really, really thin knot that's flexible that can go through your guide seamlessly. I know there are a lot of people who are against this, but if you decide to tie a super long leader and actually reel that knot onto your spool, you're not going to have any problems doing that. So if that's something that you elect to do, and there are some applications in which I will do that, me personally, I am a retie Nazi. I am retying all the time, so I do tend to leave my leaders very long so that as I retie throughout the day, I'm not constantly having to tie a new leader. I'm only tying, cutting off a section of the leader and retying, and I still have a little bit of room left over. The other beauty about this setup is also that you're really going to save line here. You can buy one spool of braid per rod that you have, and then you could buy one piece or one spool of fluorocarbon, and that'll almost last you an entire year. You got to think that braid that's on your spool is really not getting damaged and nicked up and beat up all that much. You're not going to have to change it on a near constant basis. You probably need to change it maybe once or twice a year. Meanwhile, that spool of fluorocarbon, you're going to have enough leader material to get you through an entire year. So it's a very efficient way of being able to keep your fresh line on your spool on a constant basis. But let me walk you through an FG nut, and very quickly, I'll explain as we go. It's going to be very hard for me to talk just because the key to this here is I like to keep tension on the main braided line. So I put the main braided line in my mouth and I actually bite down on it to make sure that I have good control over it. But what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to take this braided line and I'm going to cross the fluorocarbon. So there we go, then me talking and dropping the line. Right? And we're going to cross the fluorocarbon. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to weave it once around above and then once around below. And we're going to alternate back and forth. And we're going to do this about 20 times. And after 3 or 4 times, that knot is going to start to form. So what I'm going to want to do is you're going to be having a hard time seeing it. But as the knot starts to form, I want to take my fingers and I want to pinch it. And what it's going to do is I'm going to try to hold it. I don't want to lose ground on what I've done. I want to keep this nice and tight throughout the sequence, because up until the very end, this knot is not really cinched and very strong until the very end. So what I'm going to do is I want to keep pinching it so that I don't lose ground along the way. And then what I'll do is I'll show you the end. We throw a couple of hitch knots on there to just kind of solidify it and finish the knot off. So we're going to go ahead and just show you how I do this. The braided line, we've got the fluorocarbon, once above, once under. And you're going to see it's just really starting to form now. And again, I'm going to try to pinch it as we go, because I don't want to lose ground on what I've already woven on there. You can do this as many times as you'd like. I'd recommend at least 20. And we're just continuing to weave it back and forth. Over the top, then under the bottom. Okay. So what we have is we have the main line here. This is the braid tag end. This is the tag end of the fluorocarbon, and you have the rest of your leader coming out this way. Now what I'm going to do is I want to take the two pieces of braid and I want to put them together. Okay? And when I put these two pieces of braid together, once again, it's not fully cinched yet, so we don't want to let go. Okay? And I want to take this tag end of the fluorocarbon, and I'm just going to put a hitch knot. And the hitch knot is just one time around and through the center. So I'm going to go around both pieces of braid, and I'm going to go through the loop that I just made. And at this point, it's not rock solid yet, but we pretty much have the makings of our line here. Let's put in 2 more hitch knots. And when we do that, then we can actually start to cinch this knot down. And when you cinch this thing down, you're going to see that it doesn't move a whole lot. But you are going to feel how strong it is. Okay. By cinching this down, I want to grab both the leader main line, or the main line from the braid, and the leader. And I'm just going to give it a good pull. Okay. Now what we have here is we have the braid tag end, we have the fluorocarbon tag end, mainline braid, the leader. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to trim, and you can do this really, really close to the knot. As close as you can is better. But I'm going to go ahead and I want to trim the braid and trim that tag end off the braid. So now I just have my braided line, and I have a tag end from the fluorocarbon. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and put 2 or 3 more hitch knots with this tag of the fluorocarbon. And what that's going to do is I just did 3 hitch knots around both lines of the braid. But now what I want to do is I want to do it around the single line of the braid. And what's going to do is it's going to give her a tapering effect. So you see that the front of the knot is extremely tapered. The back end is a little bulky because of the hitch knots I just put on there. I want to add 2 more smaller hitch knots on there. Okay? And then we're going to finalize this thing, and we'll be all set and good to go. You know, this is rated as being one of the strongest knots there is, and it was rated as the strongest knot to braid to join braid and fluorocarbon together. You know, and up against the uni to uni modified Albright. This was by far the winner. Now go ahead and take a look at this knot here. And that is extremely thin, flexible knot that'll actually go through any of your guides. And we got a little bit of a, I guess I'm going to trim this up nice. And if you really feel that you want to go ahead and add a dab of super glue, by all means, feel free to do that. Really not an issue if you really want to go ahead and try that out. But once again, this will go through your guides, this will go onto your spool, and you're not going to have to worry about this thing breaking at all. I mean, I'm going to pull this thing until it starts to cut my fingers, and we are not budging at all. Great knot. Super flexible, super thin. And once again, I'm doing this here with 10-pound fluorocarbon and 15-pound braid. Pretty much at the high end of what you'd ever want to tie this knot with. And you can see how thin that knot actually is. If you think about going with a thinner braid and a thinner fluorocarbon, the knot's going to be even thinner than that. I mean, you're talking about, this is the best knot in the business. So, by all means, like, comment, share. Any questions, concerns, go ahead and throw that on there as well. Take a look at Bear Hill Baits. Thank you very much. Have a great night.